Hey, deserving listeners, a lot of you have been asking me to react to this apology video by Andrew Callaghan, in which he has been, I think, accused of some sexual aggressive behavior. Let's get into it. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast and YouTube channel. Obviously, this video carries a trigger warning. If you have such triggers, talk to your therapist before watching this, of course. I thought I would actually watch another video that someone sent me as a background to this before I watch his response. So let's go to that.
In a far worse light. The internet's favorite vagabond is being accused of sexual coercion, manipulation, and assault by multiple women all across America.
Okay, so right off the bat, we're hearing that Andrew Callaghan has been accused by multiple people of sexually assaulting them. When we hear that, usually that does mean that the individual has been indeed assaulting people. It's a well-known fact in our field that victims know that there are consequences to coming forward, so usually victims never come forward. The vast majority of sexual assault victims never report to anyone, maybe not even their friends and family, maybe not even their therapist. That can happen sometimes. So when people come forward, generally speaking, it is an indication that something happened. When you have multiple people coming forward, then almost always that indicates that a lot of things have happened. And often it's just the tip of the iceberg, because the people who have come forward are deciding to, and there are consequences for them to do so. Andrew Callaghan, I'm guessing, has a group of followers that will bully these people coming forward, I'm guessing, I don't know. And of course, we live in a misogynistic society that will try to attack women in particular who come forward. So we're hearing that. Also, I have seen Andrew Callaghan, I should say, a little bit on the internet or somewhere. He sort of had a amateur style of going around and interviewing people about various things. Actually, for those of you who don't know, let's watch one of his videos.
Yeah, he's a good friend, and this is a little bit more firm. And they're the best pillows I've ever had.
Which one do you prefer?
I prefer the softer one, the medium fill. The standard's a little tough on my neck.
Did you enjoy his pillows prior to his endorsement of Donald Trump?
Well, they've been around for a long time. I couldn't afford them. He cut the price.
So these are the videos that I remember seeing where he will go to rallies or protests and will interview people and seemingly find some very interesting characters, people with interesting points of view, with problematic points of view, with racist, misogynistic points of view, and he will get them to talk and out themselves as who they are. And I think the purpose is to reveal to the public what some of these people are saying and what they believe, and also to have something to laugh at, because it's usually done in a comedic manner. And so this is the style. I don't know if this is all that Andrew Callaghan did. When I went on HBO Max, I saw that there was a documentary that he just released rather recently, just a few weeks ago, I think, in which he goes around to different rallies and will interview people about gun rights and abortion and other kinds of things.
Let's take a look back at Andrew's history with being accused of sexual misconduct. The first time dates back to June 10th, 2020, when an Instagram user named Sophia posted on their story alleging they hung out with him and he was trying so hard to F my drunk friend who made it clear she said no. And that Andrew is a manipulative ass mother effer who was using his platform to get girls to sleep with him. This user then posted a story from another alleged victim that said this: "Yeah, he went to school with me my freshman year, R-worded an underage girl in Seattle, and was a total creep to a bunch of other girls at my friend's high school in Seattle."
Wait, is he from Seattle? Yeah, it says he's 25 years old, born in Philadelphia, but grew up in Seattle in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. Okay, so we're hearing about his behavior. It seems like it might, at least the allegations, extend into his childhood, into when he was a teenager.
"I hung out with him once my freshman year when I was still 17, and he aggressively came on to me, even after I told him now multiple times, then tried to kiss me and get me to go back to his place even after I told him I was uncomfortable. Then he tried following me and my roommate home in the dark. This user then claimed that 5 to 10 different women came forward claiming similar experiences with Andrew after he released his friend's story, 3 of which are allegedly underage. When confronted about the validity of the story, a Reddit user claiming to be file format stated this: "The incident happened. I spoke with the victim after. Andrew knows what he did. Multiple women have came forward, some publicly, others are scared too, and for good reason. Look at how y'all are acting. Then a 17-year-old came forward.
Okay, so we're seeing what I thought and figured, which is what would happen, which often this is what happens, is when you have a famous person who is accused of doing these sorts of things, the fans will attack the accusers, will attack the victims. And so I think we just saw some evidence of that. And that's another reason why a lot of people don't come forward. A lot of victims do not come forward. The vast, vast majority of victims do not come forward. This is an established fact in our field. It's perhaps getting slightly better. And there's a bit of a myth that I think is developing that with Me Too and more perpetrators being outed and identified as such, that we have solved the problem. We have not solved the problem. I'm guessing that the vast majority of the people in power who have abused their power to harm people in this way have still yet to be outed. Plus, that doesn't account for all the people who are perpetrators who are not famous, right? There are still all sorts of systems in place that keep victims quiet or punish victims. There are criminal justice systems that don't react well to victims when they come forward, that will protect perpetrators, particularly if they have privilege. So we have a long way to go.
Going into the bar and buying me shots, then pulled me around the corner and forcibly tried to make out with me until my roommate noticed and stopped him. Then he got her to go away again, and I kept telling him I had a boyfriend, and he said, "It's cool, I have a long-distance girlfriend, we are open. Do you want to have a threesome with us when she comes to town next week?"
So the allegations are pretty specific. They're not just saying he did something to me. I'm not showing you all the allegations, but the allegations have a lot of detail to it, which lend itself to credibility. We can't know for sure, obviously, but it lends itself to that. We are hearing a modus operandi, an MO, a pattern that the perpetrator will exhibit. They usually do. Perpetrators usually will follow the same pattern, the same set of behaviors. When we heard from the victims of Harvey Weinstein, we heard an extremely similar story over and over and over again. Bill Cosby had a very patterned MO, and we're hearing that, I think, about the allegations against Andrew Callaghan. Essentially, what it sounds like he does is he will befriend women, and he will be very persistent. They keep giving him the cold shoulder. They keep saying no. They keep saying, "Get away from me," and he just persists. He just keeps trying, and he pressures them and then eventually assaults them.
And kept me in a little corner, pushing me about until my roommate's boyfriend came over and tried to fight his 22-year-old ass. Then we broke away and tried to walk home, just the two of us, and he followed us by himself halfway back to the dorms until...
That's another part of his MO, is that after the women, the young women or the teenage girls will say no and get away from him, he will stalk them, essentially, follow them back home. If this is true, then yikes. I mean, there's so many things about this, obviously, that are yikes, but that's a level of predation that is pretty high, right? To get no, 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 and all these signals that the person doesn't want to be with you, and you just persist and persist, and then after they run away from you in fear, you follow them like you're in a horror movie or something, like you're a horror movie villain, right? I don't know, but it's starting to sound like there might be some sadism in there, some sexual sadism, maybe some psychopathy, lack of empathy. I don't know, obviously, but it's sounding pretty... I didn't realize. I thought it was just one or two mild allegations, which still would be horrible, but this sounds on a level that is... yikes.
I'm just gonna, in brief, say that I had hooked up with Andrew previously. He creeped me out, made me feel weird, was mean, demanding. He hit me up again after this time to hang out with me again, and I said, no, I don't want to hang out with you anymore. I don't want to sleep with you ever again. Asked me why. I told him why. He invited me to go out to dinner so he could apologize. I go to the dinner. He's not really talking to me, and then I'm like, so did you have something you wanted to say? And he's like, oh yeah, do you want to have sex in your car after this? And I was like, no, I don't. Is there anything else you want to say? And he was like, oh, yeah, sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable. Are you joking? You really don't want to have sex in your car after.
So this lends itself to credibility as well, because not only is it a very similar story to the seemingly dozens of other stories from other people who didn't know each other in different towns. There are people in Seattle. Apparently he lived in New Orleans for a while, and there are similar stories there. Another town that he's lived in, maybe LA, I don't know. So if this story is true, there would be two main hypotheses. One is that he lacks the ability to understand what people are trying to tell him, which I don't think is true. He, in his videos, exhibits that he can think fast enough and well enough to be able to manage getting an HBO TV show. The other option is that he absolutely does know that he is putting women in very difficult situations that they don't like, that they feel predated upon, that they feel assaulted. So then you have to ask, well, why would he want to do that to someone? Well, there is a thing, I don't know about Andrew Callaghan, but I have treated people with sadism or sexual sadism. It's a personality disorder. It's not included in the DSM anymore, but it absolutely is a personality disorder. It's part of the dark tetrad. For whatever reason, either genetically or experience-wise in their early life, they developed a personality in which they take a tremendous amount of pleasure by harming other people, by putting people through harm. This can be a sexual pleasure, or it can just be pleasure. Some of these individuals will prey on other people, but many of them will prey on people online because it's so much easier to make people uncomfortable or to harm others through the anonymity of the internet, right? But there are obviously a lot of people who will harm people in person as well. So there's a fair amount of people in the prison system who have this disorder and have been caught in their harm of other human beings, whether it's through violence, torture, or sexual sadism, sexual assault. So when I hear these stories, it sounds like, potentially, I can't know obviously without assessing him, but it sounds like someone who wakes up in the morning and lives a life just like anyone else, but in the way that you might like to have a good meal at the end of the day, or you might like to have consensual sex with your partner. For people who have these kinds of red flags, like Andrew Callaghan does right now, these individuals also want to harm others sexually. They want to put people in situations where they feel uncomfortable, where they feel forced to do things that they don't want to do, where they might be actually being actively traumatized. This is an extremely rare personality disorder, by the way. I want to emphasize that. It is even rarer than psychopathy, or what the internet will call sociopaths, people with antisocial personality disorder. And listen to all my deep dives on that if you want to hear. There are some distinctions potentially based on certain clinical literature, but it's pretty rare that individuals will have this disorder, but they're out there. And they will often create a wake of destruction and trauma behind them as they abuse people.
No, I don't want to do that. Get out of my car.
Okay, so I won't show everything that this individual is saying because it was pretty graphic in terms of a sexual assault. But if you want to watch this, by the way, this YouTube channel is called The Buckingham Show, so you can watch the full. I recommend if you're interested. There's a lot of detail in here, a lot of good reporting, seemingly. And so this individual is talking about a pretty graphic assault from Andrew Callaghan. It's not just pressuring, it's an account of a physical assault against an individual. Truly awful. Awful.
Quickly and erratically down the road, I pulled into a busier street and I stopped abruptly, thinking, like maybe someone will realize something is wrong, or if someone is honking at me, like he'll feel uncomfortable and want to leave the car. But I guess it did make him uncomfortable that I did that, and I told him to get the fuck out of my car, and he was like, "Can I at least get a kiss goodbye?"
All right, I never thought I'd make a video like this, but I think there's an important conversation to be had, and I just want to be fully accountable, honest, and transparent with all of you guys. So I'd like to start by thanking every single person who's came out in the past week to speak about different ways in which my behavior has made them feel uncomfortable or pressured during a sexual situation, and to people who said that I've made unwanted advances and had a hard time with rejection. I'm sure this was not easy to do. It's never easy to speak out. And
I will say that his style of responding is better seeming than other people in the situation. At least he's saying something a lot of times people don't. And he is not blaming the victims. He's not saying they didn't happen. Maybe he will. But the beginning is promising. However, the way in which he describes what he did, he says, let's rewind it and hear the wording, but he's saying, I was pressuring and I was having a hard time with rejection. With the way that the stories sounded, and there were multiple people who had very similar stories, and we just have to imagine there are so many others who have not come forward because of the consequences for doing so are so great. The allegations describe him as wanting people to be uncomfortable by pressuring people who obviously and repeatedly indicate that they are not into it. That is not someone who is not understanding what's happening or who is having a hard time with rejection. If anything, he seemed to crave rejection. I don't know that, obviously, but the allegations are in line with perpetrators who actually want rejection. They don't want people to say yes. They only want people to say no because that's what they get pleasure from. They get pleasure from people saying no and them overpowering them. Think of Bill Cosby, the allegations against him. At the height of his powers for many, many years, he could have had sex with all sorts of people, and maybe he did, and yet he still would drug people, allegedly, and assault them while they were asleep. There's no functional reason why you would do that unless you get pleasure from doing that. It's not a means to an end. It is the end to pressure someone. So the way that he is described to have behaved, it doesn't sound like someone who is the way that he's summarizing this rewind.
Every single person who's came out in the past week to speak about different ways in which my behavior has made them feel uncomfortable or pressured during a sexual situation, and to people who
uncomfortable or pressured in a sexual situation. I mean, I guess that is true. It's not a lie, but it's a minimization, I would say. Maybe he'll get into it.
Who said that I've made unwanted advances and had a hard time with rejection.
A hard time with rejection. It didn't sound like that to me. It sounded like that was the whole point, was that he wanted to put people in situations where they would reject him, and then that's when the pressure and the assault would become even more severe. These are allegations, of course. I can't know if they're true, but they sound credible.
I'm sure this was not easy to do. It's never easy to speak out, and it was hard for me to hear as well, because to be honest with you, up until this point, I didn't even really realize that I had this pattern that had affected multiple people.
Again, it's good that he's saying that he appreciates people coming forward, but then he says, I didn't even know I had this pattern. That's hard to believe. If any of the accounts are accurate or credible or truthful, it'd be hard to believe that a perpetrator who does that sort of thing would not know that they are pressuring people. The stories aren't just he pressured someone, they kind of gave him the cold shoulder, and then he kept persisting. That's not what we heard. What we heard were people saying, no, I don't want to, and him continuing to do it, and on multiple occasions with the same people, right? And then forcing himself physically on other people after they've indicated no, 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 no. It doesn't sound like someone who wouldn't know what they're doing.
It's by my closest collaborators, and my name was printed in 40 different news outlets next to the words sexual misconduct, and I just kind of spiraled into a mental health crisis.
That's not the word misconduct. That's too light. This is, I don't know what's going to get me canceled, what's going to get me taken off of YouTube, but the R word is definitely a descriptor of the allegations. Sexual assault, sexual predation, sexual crimes have been occurred, allegedly. It's not just misconduct. Misconduct sounds like you told a bad joke at a work party or something. That's not what we heard from the alleged victims.
I'm okay now, but I don't really think this is about me. This is about the people that I've affected. So I just want to express my complete sympathy, respect, and support for anyone who I've done wrong by. And I really want to do better and be fully accountable for everything.
All right, so in my deep dive on apologies, I developed a system of analyzing apologies and how to differentiate between a non-apology and an apology. And often these public figures will provide what I would call a type of non-apology, which is to say you're sorry. You know, they'll say, I'm sorry, I take full accountability, I apologize. They'll say those words. I feel bad for those individuals. They will say those phrases. He, I think, has a lot of money and can pay for consultants to help him with this. And I think he has a lot of internet savvy, at least he has demonstrated. I think, from my understanding, he just started his own YouTube channel and worked his way up in notoriety where he had his own HBO documentary that's centered on him. So you have to have a lot of internet savvy to get to that point, right? So there's a possibility, I can't know, that he has calculated that if he says the right things, that he can get his career back on track. The proof is in the pudding. So if he actually cares about these individuals and is actually sorry, then he will highlight their story. He will say, they said this about me, and that is horrific what I did. What I did is potentially criminal. What I did was absolutely victimizing, and there's no excuse, and something's wrong with me. Would be the thing. So that would be an apology. And a non-apology is to say you're sorry, but not really identify the transgression and not really care about the effect that you've had on other people. So I don't know, maybe after this video is only a few minutes longer, so maybe subsequently after this, he has actually done things that have demonstrated a true apology, but it's not sounding promising at this point. If he came out of the gate and said, I have a problem, I have committed some serious assaults on other people of varying degrees, and I have a problem, and I'm so sorry for what you will hear people say this often when they're being convicted, when they're in court and they're being faced with statements from the victims. This doesn't always happen, obviously, but it can. Perpetrators can sincerely turn to the victims in court or otherwise and seemingly apologize, can authentically apologize for their effect on other people. It happens. So I've seen that before. You might have seen those things before, and this doesn't look like it yet. Maybe it will. Let's watch.
Everything that I've done. So that being said, I want to make a few things clear. I've always taken no for an answer. As far as consent, I've never.
Again, these are allegations, innocent until proven guilty, but it's hard to believe given the multiple accounts from multiple victims in multiple cities over multiple years, going back to high school. I mean, he's 25, so it wasn't that long ago for him, but 8 years, 9 years, maybe longer. Seemingly dozens of people who have come forward with their face and name and have identified themselves and given very detailed accounts that are very specific and oddly familiar across victims that sound extremely credible. Could they all be lying? Sure, they could be. Absolutely. I can't know that. But if I were to put my money down on something, I would say that all of the victims and their stories are true. If that's true, then yikes. He just says that he's always taken no for an answer. Yeah. That's not what the victims are saying.
Complete sympathy, respect, and support for anyone who I've done wrong by. And I really want to do better and be fully accountable for everything that I've done. So that being said, I want to make a few things clear. I've always taken no for an answer. As far as consent, I've never overstepped that line. But, I think I want to have a more nuanced and important conversation about power dynamics, pressure, and coercion.
Maybe this is authentic. Maybe it's real. Maybe he is emerging into awareness. He has a long way to go, but maybe he will get there eventually. But I don't know. But he's invoking phrases. Given his internet savvy, I assume that he has thought a lot about his response, and this is much more calculated than it is coming across. It comes across as quite off the cuff and genuine, and maybe it is. but who knows? Anyway, it's a possibility that he has observed how other people in his position have been accused of these sorts of things, have incurred a bit of cancellation, but have emerged relatively unscathed, like Louis C.K., for example. He was accused of abusing his power of his position and forced women into situations that they were extremely uncomfortable with. And he was outed for that. And he seemingly took responsibility and apologized. I don't know that. Don't quote me on that. And then over time, he, I think, managed to get his career kind of back in order. Not the way it was before, but he, I think, is still working and still respected by many. So I don't know, but Andrew Callaghan right now is using phrases along those lines. Like I have a lot to learn about the nuances of power, because that is a much more palatable story to the public. I would imagine that for someone who has power, like you are a boss and you have 5 employees and you have a crush on one of your employees and you ask one of them to go on a date or something, and they feel pressured because you're the boss and they go on a date with you, but they didn't really want to go on a date with you. And then you try to kiss them goodnight and they give in, and the victim kisses goodnight. And then the next day they tweet or they call HR or something, and there's allegations of an inappropriate, abusive relationship that predates on someone that is a subordinate. That story on the cancellation scale, if you will, is not as high as what we are hearing from the victims. The victims are talking about things that are far, far beyond that scenario. But he's using language that, I can imagine if someone hadn't heard the allegations, they would hear his apology here and they would think, oh, it must have just been some mild thing that happened at work. It was a mild power nuance thing. He'll learn. And so then he can get his career back on track.
For everything that I've done. So that being said, I want to make a few things clear. I've always taken no for an answer. As far as consent, I've never overstepped that line. But I think I want to have a more nuanced and important conversation about power dynamics, pressure, and coercion. Because, like I said, I think for a long time, I was behaving in a way that I actually thought was normal. I thought that, going home from the bar alone made you a loser.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I don't know what's happening, obviously, but if the allegations are true, it is interesting the way that he's framing this. Now, either he's telling the truth and everyone else is lying, which I guess is a long shot, but possible. I suppose that's possible. But if the victims are being truthful, then he either sees it this way, this is how he perceives it, which does happen. People will they will predate on others and they will go into denial about it. They'll say, no, that never happened. And they'll just we have a very robust, competent skill of denial. When we don't want to think about something, we will not think about it. And it's a chance that that's what we're witnessing here. There's another chance that he absolutely knows what he has done, but he is calculating a response so that he can get his career back on track. He just blew up. He just got his HBO situation going. He's been, I Googled him, and he's been interviewed on CNN and all these other places. He's about to become gigantic. And right at that time, suddenly his career is seemingly potentially coming to an end. Like he would have to go back to school to figure out another career or something, or get a job at a restaurant or in retail or something. Like that's where he's at. Maybe he could retire on whatever he's saved up. But anyway, you could imagine that he would think pretty long and hard about how he should respond. And he might be savvy enough to know that if he just denies everything, then he'll just be canceled, because people will tend to believe the victims. But if he massages it in a certain way and he spins it, he'll say, I agree and I feel sorry for what I did, and I will not throw the victims under the bus, but I frame it this way, if I can frame it in a way that shows that I am a young man who feels insecure and I didn't know what else to do. No one taught me. And now I've learned my lesson, then maybe I can get my career back. It's really interesting the way he says this. I could see someone, if they hadn't heard the allegations or they were looking for an excuse to, and maybe that's the point, like Andrew Callaghan might calculate that his fans are looking for any excuse to stay on board. And if he can give them an excuse, then he will do that. And so this could be that. It's him not disagreeing with the allegations, but it's him reframing it in this whole other storyline. Okay, so let's adjourn there and tune in next time when I continue watching and reacting in part 2. So everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.